If Microsoft Azure already features in your cloud strategy or is likely to do so going forward, then Microsoft Azure Stack could reduce the need for compromise while adding location flexibility, enabling Azure services to run from your own data centers or those of trusted hosters or service providers. In this video, analysts Richard Edwards and Tony Locke discuss Azure Stack in the context of your hybrid cloud strategy.
So, Richard, you've been looking at the Microsoft Azure Stack recently. Do you think it can help with IT consistency and help organizations do things differently?
Well, it can do if the business fit is right, and we've written a couple of articles that explore some of the ins and outs there. So we'll provide those as links at the end of this piece.
Okay, so looking at this at a high level, it might be useful to start by describing exactly what Azure Stack is, since it is still relatively new.
Yes, it is new and it's still maturing, but I guess it's not totally new. So Azure Stack is Azure, only in your own data center, or perhaps that of a hosting partner or service provider. So if you're familiar with Azure, as many enterprises seem to be, then you're already halfway there.
What about if you're not familiar with Microsoft Azure? How would you describe things?
Well, Azure is Microsoft's public cloud offering. It's like Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud Platform. So IT can use it to run virtual machines and containers using infrastructure as a service. And developers can use its platform as a service capabilities to extend, modernize, or build new applications. And like other public clouds, it's a pay-as-you-go model. So there are no significant upfront costs and no hardware to take care of. But as with any public cloud, you're effectively running your workloads and applications on someone else's computer.
Indeed, but it's that someone else's computer that isn't here. That can be problematic for people sometimes.
Yeah, I guess we do hear that, and pushback can often be about security and privacy and data sovereignty. But network latency can be a real issue too, depending on where your business operates from. And there might even be times when parts of your business are disconnected from the internet or network altogether. And after all, it's why we have those distributed systems today. But if you can operate IT and build applications in a way that is truly independent of location, but consistent with your IT ops teams, developers and users, then that could prove very useful.
Absolutely, nirvana almost. So I agree that this does sound useful, and there are certainly plenty of distributed systems around. After all, the cloud itself is distributed. So how does Azure Stack compare with Azure? They're not identical, are they?
No, they're not identical, but they do offer this consistent model for IT and developers. So if we look at this diagram, we can see that the key layers are all the same, and really only the hardware is different.
So can you talk me through the layers?
Yes, of course. So if we look at the top layer on sort of both sides of the house here, we start with the Azure portal. So those who are familiar with Azure will know that this is really the primary user interface. You know, the Azure Stack user interface itself is very, very similar to this. So here's an immediate level of consistency. Then we have PowerShell, which is Microsoft's task automation on configuration management framework. These are the command line tools and scripting languages, and these are consistent again across Azure and Azure Stack. Then if we look at DevOps tools, we have support for continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment activities. Again, these are consistent across the two offerings.
What about management and monitoring? Is that consistent too?
Yep, you've got Azure Monitor and log analytics there too, so for more consistency. So really what we're seeing is that the private cloud works the same as the public cloud.
I see we've also got the Azure Resource Manager.
Yep, this enables IT to create groups of related services. So these can be deployed, managed and monitored together rather than separately.
When it comes to things like IaaS and PaaS, what's on offer today?
Well, we've already said it's still maturing, but out of the box, infrastructure as a service features include your Docker and Kubernetes. I think that's some in preview still. Advanced networking and load balancing and storage, of course. But to me, it's the platform as a service where things start to get really interesting, particularly for developers. So today, Azure Stack offers a range of services for building those scalable distributed applications. You get your Azure Container Service and Cloud Foundry. And even though you probably won't be using all of these capabilities initially, I think it's worth knowing that there's plenty there for you to use, so you can focus your efforts on your priorities.
So there's a lot to explore there. Is there anything that Azure Stack cannot do?
Let's be clear, Azure Stack isn't a silver bullet, and there are some things worth knowing, I think. So the first thing I'd point to is that Azure Stack isn't a virtualization replacement product. I guess the second most important one, it's not a do-it-yourself infrastructure sandbox, and it's not an install and forget product. It must be managed and maintained to remain consistent with Azure, as after all, this is where the business value lies.
That's good to know. So what's the next step for people looking at this?
You'll already have a sense of what you want from Azure Stack if you're an existing Azure customer, but it's still important to give the matter some detailed consideration. This means business and IT managers sitting down with developers to establish a clear shared vision of the applications that they want to build and deploy. And an architect is often best placed, I feel, to lead the discussion, with input, of course, from business, development and operations teams.
So it sounds pretty much like business as usual then. What about the underlying hardware?
Well, yes, it is. It's evolution, not revolution. And you get your Azure Stack integrated systems, as they're called, from the likes of Dell, HPE, Fujitsu or Lenovo.
So do you buy, lease or rent the hardware from the OEMs and then it's pay as you go with Microsoft?
Yes, you've got it. You can start with a single node test kit, of course, but remember these integrated systems are built to your specific specifications to support your workloads and business requirements. Microsoft and its partners provide the planning tools, but you'll still need to sit down with your Azure Stack partner and have that discussion about your future plans, particularly your growth plans. So think what you might need over those next 6 months and then take it from there. And then once it's plumbed in, the hardware is largely a hands-off system with the ops team still monitoring and managing the system. And it's Microsoft's job, together with its partners, to handle updates and patches, including firmware. And of course, it is now your system, so these can be delayed for up to 6 months if you really need to. Now, we've produced a business fit paper and some other resources to help IT and business managers explore the possibilities. So my advice would be to take a look at those.
That sounds like very sound advice. Thanks, Richard.